Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space 11.5, Petals of the Lotus. We are back.
As opposed to Stems of the Rose. Nice one. Last time, we had an endgame moment where we got like little flashes of everyone's reactions to Skipper's message. And then the crew landed on Elysian Fields, and Klein, and the other guy was Johan, right?
Klaus and Johan,
Klaus. Yeah. Klaus started explaining the plan, which was that the super weapon, the Hanged Man, would create a field that repelled organizations, so they'd have to come in one at a time. And Dragon was like, okay. And I think that's all that happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure I wasn't forgetting
anything. Got super spooked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and then the Supreme appeared, and then a hand landed on his shoulder, and then a hand landed on his shoulder. That was really good. Oh, my God. I don't know if you saw the discourse, but we were all very excited about the Supreme's arrival and his personality. Okay. Dragon was surprised. For some reason, he'd expected the interior of the Lotus to be dark, but that wasn't the case at all. Plentiful populations of bioluminescent fungus cast the entire spherical landscape in a calm blue glow, washing over the group's faces as they walked across the bridge. It wasn't especially bright either, of course. The immediate area was illuminated, but the further you went, the darker it got. All around them, strange strands of biological material stretched from wall to wall, occasionally twitching and squirming. At first, Dragon had mistaken them for cobwebs or something, but, with a chill, he soon realized what they really were, and what this really was. They were walking through a massive brain. Ruth rubbed her arms to ward off the cold as they crossed the bridge to the center of the Lotus interior. "Is this place alive?" she asked, looking around warily. "Brain dead," grunted Johan Blackbird, leading the group, the barrel of his rifle arm almost scraping against the metal walkway. "The functions work, but it needs people to get them going." "The cogitans," Bruno nodded, eyes fixed straight ahead. "Which is, plural, by the way." He jerked a thumb back towards Dragon. "So, unless we're cloning the sky, we're the rest." Skipper cracked his neck. That old easy grin was still on his face, but just barely. The closer they got to their confrontation with the Supreme, the closer it got to slipping off his face. "Well, we've been gathering allies and weapons," he said. "Blackbeard here and his crew have been grabbing the rest of the cogitants we need." I have to ask, why the big thing about breaking out Dragon if they were just getting a fuckload of cogitans?
Well, he got one, and then his job was like partly getting some cogitants, and then getting the rest of the stuff they wanted.
Okay. Johan clicked his tongue in annoyance at Skipper's words. "A selection of cogitants from across the supremacies, so we can map out its structures effectively." Edit that. It's real quick. "It's selective. It's not just a matter of grabbing people." "Well, whatever," Skipper shrugged. They reached the center of the sphere, where the various bridges converged upon a biological console of sorts. Great blue bulbs pulsed and wheezed atop a circular pedestal, a smell like bleach oozing out of their pores as they twitched. Dragon found himself holding his nose as they approached. "This is it?" he asked.
I like the nose holding that.
Oh.
No, I thought you were doing it.
Oh, whoopsie. Klaus nodded. Oh, fuck, his voice was kind of growly.
It was a ghoul.
All it needs is physical contact. Then it hooks you right up to the neural network. Planting a hand against the bulb should be enough. That voice destroys my throat. I should have chosen a different one. Dragon leaned past the bulb, looking at the people beyond. They weren't alone, after all. It seemed the other 6 cogitants had taken the other bridges, and now they'd met up here. It was quite a varied crowd. Some looked nervous, some looked resolute, and one particular person, a girl with silver hair like Dragon's, held no emotion in their eyes at all. She looked at Dragon, and Dragon found himself quickly forced to look away. Oh? Dragon crush? Also, did you just edit Dragon to dragons?
No, it did it by itself, you saw! Finally, it's proof.
Hey, he heard Ruth saying from behind him. "This is safe, right?" "We've done thorough testing over the last few years," Klaus replied gruffly. "There's no risk at all." Ruth looked past Klaus to Skipper, who nodded in confirmation. "Proceed," Klaus said, a voice dull and without ceremony. Dragon stepped back from the console, looking back at him. "Wait, we're not doing this right now, are we? You said there are people, allies, still on their way, right? There'll be people from within the Supremacy, so they'd be caught by the shield too." Klaus thumped his cane. "It's a 2-stage activation," he pressed. "Once we'll prime the atmosphere, and the second will activate the shield. These allies should be with us by the end of the day. We'll do the first activation now, and the second when night falls. Proceed." Dragon gulped, and just like Ruth, he looked past Klaus to Skipper. The older man just nodded. He wasn't smiling. "Go ahead, kid," he said seriously. "It doesn't bite." The way Skipper said that made Dragon think that maybe the console did bite. All the same, though, he steeled himself, approached the console, and, with a courage that would have been unthinkable just a year ago, planted his hand against it. Long seconds passed. Nothing happened. Frowning, Dragon peeled his hand free of the bulb, noting with disgust a pale blue extract that clung to his skin. Was something supposed to happen there? He turned away from the console and immediately furrowed his brow. The crowd was gone. The only other person in the chamber, taking a seat on a particularly accommodating rock, was Bruno. He looked up from his script as Dragon approached. Realization dawned. "How long was I standing there?" Dragon asked. Bruno stuffed his script into his pocket, stifling a yawn. "Around 2 hours. Well, that explained why his legs were tired, if nothing else. Even after all he'd experienced, Musashi couldn't help but feel his heart tremble with excitement as he made his way through the halls of the Tartarus. Nearly everywhere he looked, he could see special officers of fame and prestige. He supposed that, as the new leader of the Seven Blades, he was technically famous too, but it certainly didn't feel like that. Aklama followed behind him, with Morgan taking up the rear. She'd been quiet ever since their encounter with the Supreme, and Musashi couldn't blame her. For one's parent to not even bother finding out what you looked like. It was a difficult situation. Musashi hadn't quite known what to say. Musashi hadn't quite known what to say either. At any rate, they'd signed in and been assigned quarters, a luxury suite usually used by visiting diplomats. That sounded comfortable enough, but Musashi would have to be sure to ensure it was secure. As well.
Let me ensure it was secure.
You fucking got me there. With so many self-interested parties hanging around, this was by no means a safe place for the Supreme Heir. They were just turning the corner to the luxury suites when they heard it. The scream. It ran down the hallways like an alarm, high-pitched and blood-curdling, with a hint of choking behind the voice. Musashi recognized it immediately. The desperate cry of someone being killed. He wasted no time. "Watch her!" Musashi cried, pushing past Morgan and charging down the hallway towards the source of the sound. Thrusters granted him speed as he ran past doors and doors, but deep down, he suspected that it might already be too late. A scream like that did not wait long before being followed by death. But why? Why here? Had the enemy already infiltrated the Tartarus somehow, or has a fight broken out between some special officers? Musashi would have liked not to suspect his colleagues of such pointless conflict, but he was well aware that not all shared his code of conduct. He got his answer quickly, and it was exactly as he dreaded. The victim had already been dragged out into the middle of the recreation area and tossed onto the far ball court like a sack of potatoes. When he was alive, the young ensign might have been handsome, but it was impossible to tell now, for his face had been caved right in. Other personnel were keeping their distance from the body, whispering among themselves. No surprise, for the killer had made no effort to conceal himself. Ettore Musashi had never met this man, but he knew him by reputation. The Baron Lunalet de Fleur. Is it Lunalet or Lunalet?
Lunalet.
The Baron Lunalet de Fleur. Is this the murderer or the guy who was murdered?
Well, the killer. The murderer.
His attire was eccentric and only the way a special officer could get away with. An extravagantly ruffled suit and a top hat, both so dark a red they seemed black at first glance. His hair was red too, cascading in curls down the sides of his head, framing his painted white face. A face that held the kind of eerie symmetry only achievable through copious surgeries. Even though he just killed a man, he showed no signs of remorse or responsibility. He just sneered down at the corpse with those vivid red eyes, before glancing up at the approaching Musashi. "This peon tried to tell me I'd be sleeping in the common quarters," he said calmly, as if that explained his actions. "Can you believe that?" Musashi glared as he crouched down next to the body, futilely checking for a pulse he knew he would not find. "You murdered this man," he growled. "You think that will goes unanswered?" The Fleur raised his red eyebrows in amusement. "Oh," he said, red lips twisting into a smirk. "Oh, I recognize you. Toy Musashi, isn't it? The Supreme Heir's nursemaid. My condolences. I hear she's quite the charity case. Congratulations on the promotion, at any rate." As Musashi rose back to his feet, he opened one hand, ready to ignite a radiant if it came down to it. "Watch your tongue!" he snapped. "Then again, I must have sympathy for her as well," Lunalei chuckled, placing a hand on his heart. "Her caretaker doesn't seem to understand the role of a special officer, after all." Hot anger boiled through Musashi's veins, but he did his best not to let it show. His steely glare continued. "What?" Lunalei ran a hand down his cheek, as if he were a patron admiring the artwork that was himself. "I shall tell you. Yes, I think I shall tell you. Oh!" He laughed, as if he were explaining something very simple to someone very stupid. "To be a special officer is to be recognized for your strength, and to be granted the freedom you deserve. The mere fact that we are special officers should be enough for others to tread carefully around us." He waved a hand down towards the corpse. "Those who forget their place must be shown the results of such actions. Otherwise, we might as well not be special officers at all." Sorry. "Forget their place?" Musashi clenched his fists. "He gave you news you didn't like. That is not worthy of punishment." Lunalei smiled thinly. "The strong determine what is worthy of punishment. That is the only metric." There was only so much a man could listen to. Musashi stepped forward, igniting his radiant and swinging it in a single movement. His speed was impeccable, of course, but his opponent had seen the attack coming. The slightest chuckle escaped from Lunalei's lips as he pulled a black pitchfork free from his dark red aether, using the 3 spikes to block Musashi's blow. "Oh," Lunalei smiled, amused. "So you are a man of substance." "I will take you to the ship's brig," Musashi growled, pushing against Lunalei's block. "Or I will take you to the ship's morgue. It is not up to me, witch." This was not a man who deserved any consideration, for the Baron Lunalei de Fleur had a reputation. Special officers were generally given carte...
Sorry,
I lost my place. What happened?
I
I know. I lost where it was, though.
Carte blanche.
Can you highlight it? I'm lost on the page. Thank you. Special officers were generally given carte blanche to do as they wished, so long as they ultimately answered to the supremacy. But common decency only limited what they did with such freedom. The same was not true for Lunalei de Fleur. Perhaps the fact that his ancestors had kept their titles of nobility by joining with the supremacy early made him think he was already above others. But, in any case, he had no common decency. Over the years, his name had become synonymous with brutality. Such a man could not be allowed on the same ship as a Clima. A tiny, cold part of Toy Musashi earnestly hoped that execution became necessary. Their stalemate broke. Both fighters angled around each other for a superior position, and in the instant they lunged at each other. Countless lengths of string, like a rainbow spiderweb, danced through the air. Their movements were instantly halted as the strings wrapped around their limbs, holding them in place with all the severity of vices. Musashi let out a frustrated growl as he twitched in the string's embrace, arm frozen in the overhead swing that would never conclude. Dull pain radiated throughout his joints. He had no doubt that, if the wielder of the strings desired it, they were just as capable of cutting through flesh as stopping it.
Right, there you go.
Said wielder... I clapped in the mic, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Said, what?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, what were you saying?
Nothing, I was just saying go on. I thought you were stopping because I was making something.
No, yeah, I was clapping in a... Okay, awkward. Said wielder strolled out of the bathroom as casually as could be, his coat of many colors swishing around him. Some toilet paper clung to his shoe. His face, if nothing else, was no surprise. Musashi had expected to see him the second that string had crossed his vision. Wu Ming clapped sarcastically, as if applauding their showmanship. "No, fellas," he yawned. "Let's not start killing each other before we even arrive. 2 out of 10 when it comes to conduct. Seriously." Lunelay de Fleur, frozen mid-stab, glowered as Wu Ming approached, and then yelped in surprise as he was hurled backwards by the strings, slamming into the wall even as he was released. He snarled as he picked himself back up, only to stop in his tracks as Ming lifted a single calm finger. "Whoa there, friend," Ming said, eyes half-lidded, a strange shadow in his gaze. "I'm just keeping the peace here, making sure everybody's getting along, that sort of thing. If you want to turn this into a fight between me and you, though, I'm down. Just be aware, if that's the way we're going." He opened his eyes, wide and true. "You'll die, okay?" Lunelay stared into Ming's eyes for a good long moment, as if probing for weakness there, and clearly found none. He scoffed as he released his hold on his pitchfork, the weapon disintegrating into a strange ash-like substance before dissipating entirely, and turned on his heel, storming off down the corridor. After Ming was satisfied the Baron wasn't coming back, he released his hold on Musashi too. As Musashi fell to one knee, he looked up at Ming disapprovingly. "You should not have let him get away with that." Behind them, automatics were already collecting the body of the murdered ensign, transporting it for proper storage. Musashi watched, rage blazing behind his eyes, fists shaking in frustration. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was the utter picture of calm. "I wouldn't worry about it," he said, running a carefree hand through his long hair. "Guys like him always get what's coming to them. Maybe sooner rather than later. Best not right here, though. Not right now. He's got friends. It would cause some trouble for you, if you understand me." "Of course." Musashi bitterly massaged his neck as he returned to his feet. Everyone always had friends. Everyone always had allies. This is making me sad. He doesn't have anybody. Where's Musashi's friends, Tan? Where are they?
A tree and a bro.
They're only one guy right now. You've cut his friends in half.
I know.
The entire upper echelon of special officers Musashi had entered seemed to be consumed by an utter web of corruption, linking everything and everyone, making every person who needed to be taught a lesson utterly untouchable. Remember when he just, murdered a governor with no regards?
Yeah.
Goalie? Weren't those the good old days?
Yeah, but that was, even in that, in that sense, the governor is no big deal, compared to where he is right now.
Damn. More importantly, though, Wu Ming drawled, before throwing an unwelcome arm over Musashi's shoulder, "I've been wanting to talk to you, big guy."
Well, maybe Wu Ming's a friend.
Maybe I can Wu Ming you.
I got, Zagreus vibe. No, not Zagreus, from Hades, Dionysus. That's the vibe I was getting.
Dionysus?
Yeah.
Musashi, old pal.
Man, nice.
Nice cock. You were going to say it.
You would say it 10 out of 10.
Wu Ming when he sees Musashi's cock. The sky had changed since the last time Dragon had seen it. The calm blue of that morning had been replaced by a weird havoc pink! Go ahead, tell me what havoc pink means.
It's neon pink.
Is that... Wait, that's real?
It is now.
Oh, fuck you. I appreciate the reference. And, from the way the soldiers were looking up at it, he got the feeling this was not a natural phenomenon. He plunged his hands into his pockets as he walked alongside Bruno, towards the landing pads. "So, this is what the first stage of activation is?" he wondered aloud, looking up at the sky. "Apparently, it prompts the atmosphere to start producing this crystal dust," Bruno said slowly, remembering something he'd been told. "And then the second stage lets the big sphere control that dust and turn it into attack structures." Dragon raised an eyebrow. "Kind of what, Serena does, then?" "Yeah," Serena nodded, her pace shifting as she took active control. "Only without Aether, I guess. They really could do anything back then, huh? The Gene Tyrants, I mean." "If they could do anything," Dragon said, "we wouldn't have killed them." As he looked at that pink sky, the light of the sun warped through its filter. Dragon couldn't help but feel a sense of dread crawling over him. It was difficult to describe, but it was like he was looking at a massive door slamming shut on them all, sealing them inside a dungeon of sorts. No, more than that, like he was the one closing the door, locking himself in without any assistance at all. He'd promised himself a long while ago that, if Skipper's plan didn't seem to be a survivable one, he'd bail. Did this seem survivable? Battening down the hatches and hoping the Supremacy wouldn't find another way around it? Betting that they'd move in exactly the way that would be most convenient? The only one who decides what happens to me is me. Was dying here fruitlessly what he had decided would happen? It wasn't too late. He could steal a ship and leave this place easy, while everyone was distracted with the preparations. It wouldn't even really mean ditching Skipper. Even after the shield was activated, he could still leave the atmosphere so long as nobody else was in the same ship. Even as he considered those options, though, those very pragmatic and reasonable options, Dragon couldn't help but recoil away from them. It was like they burnt to the touch. He still had time. He didn't have to decide such things right now. Ruth was already waiting for them at the landing pad, where the ship had just finished setting down. It wasn't one that Dragon recognized specifically, but judging from the sleek and smooth design features, like the Unite Regent, suggested it came from the UAP. Skipper had said that there'd be reinforcements on the way, but who would this ship be carrying? His question was answered quickly. Lily Aubrisher began descending the boarding ramp as it descended, brushing her brilliant white hair out of her face. Her eyes glowed slightly as she glanced around the forest, the slightest frown on her lips. It had been a good while since it had happened, but Dragon still found himself taken aback by the physical changes that had occurred when Lily had absorbed her guardian entity. He swore he could even see sparks of electricity around her feet with each step she took. Even with all the changes, though, she still had to duck down to prevent her long antlers from scraping against the hole. Something's never changed. She squinted through the pink sunlight as she looked at them. "Feels like I haven't seen your faces in a while." Ruth grinned as she approached, raising her hand for a high five. "Same to you." Lily slapped Ruth's hand, and, as they made contact, a sudden jolt of static repelled them. Ruth rubbed her palm, wincing. "Sorry about that," Lily smirked awkwardly. "It gets hard to control. I mean, I'm strong as hell, but it still gets crazy when I go swimming." She scratched the back of her head. "It's a pain in the arse, to be honest." Dragon walked over, hands still in his pockets as he looked the ship up and down. "To be honest," he said, "I'm surprised you actually came when Skipper called. Don't you have stuff to do back on XK-12? Or Hex-K, I think they're calling it?" Lily put her hands on her hips, kicking idly at the dirt. "Yeah, about that. I kinda got exiled. Can't go back." Bruno blinked. "Huh? What?" Dragon asked, stepping forward. "What do you mean you got exiled? After all that? We freed the planet! You freed the planet!" Lily shrugged. "Yeah, but a lot of people died in the process. The battle at the swamps, and then the capital. The victims had families, and they didn't much like the idea of me taking over anything after that. So me and Ted talked, and we decided it would be best for me to head out." She let out a long sigh, and for a moment they all stood there, listening to the tweeting of the birds. Wait, there are birds on this planet?
Yeah.
Nice. With the filtered light and the sky and the news they'd just received, it all seemed very melancholy. "Seriously?" Ruth muttered, crossing her arms. "After all that, they just kick you out all alone?" "Oh," Lily blinked. "I'm not alone." Oh, wait.
I would say this is Jin entering the scene, if I'm being honest.
Jin. "Who are they?" cried out a high-pitched, ear-splitting voice. "Miss Aubrisher, who are they?" Dragon turned around, just in time for a very small person to barrel into him, knocking him down from sheer speed and tenacity. As he picked himself up from the grass, he got a better look at his attacker. It was a young white-haired boy of 9 or 10, clad in a brown shawl and flat cap, with tiny holes cut into the hat to accommodate small nubs of antlers. "Oh my god, what?" He beamed with orange eyes as he looked Dragon up and down, inspecting him thoroughly. "Wow!" he exclaimed, wonder laced into every syllable. "You have crazy eyes, meow! Who are you, wolf?" "Dragon Hadrian," muttered Dragon, glaring. It was more than a little humiliating to be knocked on your ass by a kid. "Who the hell are you?" "Wolfram!" snapped Lily. "Don't be rude! Where the hell is Vex?" Another woman bustled out of the shop, chasing after Wolfram. Before she could get a hold of him, however, he quickly scurried off, cackling away into the forest like some kind of wild animal. The woman sighed as she turned back to the group. It was clear from her antlers that she was another native of Hex-K, just like Lily and Wolfram. Dark blue hair hung limply down her head, the tips transitioning to a crimson just as bright as her eyes. She was frowning as she looked at them, and, to be frank, it seemed like a practiced frown. "Sorry, madam," she said, fiddling with her sleeves of her red jacket nervously. Belias needed help loading the supplies onto the automatic. Messed up. Oh man, what a mess. And he'd been so well behaved on the way here too. Oh no, what a mess. This is the worst case scenario. Her voice somehow managed to get across a bizarre mixture of monotony and anxiety. Forget it. Lily waved a dismissive hand. He'll find his way back. You sure? Called out a voice from above. I can go after him if you want. Dragon rolled his eyes. This parade of strange new people was quickly beginning to become predictable. He looked up at the man lounging in the branches of the massive tree above. Oh. Oh my. The man had tan skin and wild green hair, but that wasn't what caught your attention immediately. He was eating an apple, relaxed as could be, but that wasn't what caught your attention immediately. A loose black cloak was slung over his shoulders, but that wasn't what caught your attention immediately. Clearly it has, as these three things have all been mentioned before what caught my attention immediately. Oh, no, never mind. Oh, God. No, what caught your attention immediately was, "Hey!" Serena called up to him. "Could you put your dick away, please?"
No. Context.
The man said, "Okay." You should have saved your nice cock for this moment.
Hey man, nice cock.
Skipper like, "Oh, that's a nice cock." Lily very pointedly didn't look at the man as she addressed him. "Don't worry about it. Like I said, he'll come back." With that said, she turned back to Ruth and the group. "That's Ablos. Don't worry about him. He's just a freak." "It's only natural," Ablos, up in the tree, exclaimed, as if he was preaching before a congregation. "We humans were born without clothes, weren't we? So it's only right we should live without..." Dragon stopped listening. This wasn't the kind of person he needed to have a conversation with. I don't think we've seen that kind of Dragon since Arc 3. I love it. The final member of Lily's entourage exited the ship in a much less flashy manner than the rest. He was a tall, stern-looking man with dark hair and antlers of strict geometry. Just like Ablos, he wore a black cloak, but unlike Ablos, he also wore other clothes. A suit of dark armor, like some kind of knight, with a heavy greatsword slung over his back. He nodded by way of introduction.
I'd give him a very deep voice.
"Belias Hale," he said, crossing his arms, "also known as Belias of the Black, former regulator. A pleasure to make your acquaintance."
Former regulator? The ones they'd been fighting back on Hex K? Dragon gave Lily a quizzical look, and it seemed she'd read his mind, for she just shook her head in response. "Everyone's got circumstances," she said simply. "When I got, exiled, these guys insisted on coming along with me. They call themselves the Cardinal Beasts. It's kind of embarrassing, really."
"It's not embarrassing," Ablos called down. "It's a beautiful symbol of our devotion to your cause. You should praise us for such a sweet gesture."
Vex sighed exaggeratedly, a dismal expression on her face. "Embarrassing. I didn't realize you hated us that much. Oh boy, what a drag. I'm actually losing the will to live right now. Seriously? I thought we were protecting Hex K from the shadows and all that, but we were just embarrassing you. That's so messed up. I'm so sorry, madam. Damn!" Dragon took a moment to take it all in, this impromptu carnival. He found that he suddenly felt very, very sorry for Lily Oprisher. "Seems like you've got a lot going on," he finally said. "You sure you've got time to help us out here?"
Feel free to leave, said Dragon.
"You can go now." "We owe you back on Nextgay," she said, thumping her fist into her palm with a flash of electricity. "Having that still up in the air would piss me off. We'll help you take care of that little Supreme and be off on our way." She grinned wide and bright, but Dragon couldn't help but feel it was the grin of a person who didn't understand what they were talking about. "Hey, Serena spoke up. This is great and all, but where's Skipper?" The warehouse where they were storing it was a little ways away from the main base, so Skipper had no choice but to set out on a long and awkward walk through the woods with his guest. As the two of them strode through the undergrowth, Skipper couldn't help but feel the other man's glare drilling into the back of his head. Well, it only made sense. As they reached the doors of the huge box-shaped building, Skipper looked over his shoulder and offered Roy Oliphant Dawkins an insincere grin. "And here we are," he said, tapping in the code, "holding place for one of our many, many exclusive products." The door slid open. The hanged man. This man is so hanged right now.
Oblos is in there.
Oh, man. Oh, my God. The hung man? Alright, fun fact this week. How big is Oblos' cock?
Substantial.
You have to give me a direct
No.
sizes.
I won't.
Why?
I have to leave stuff for the fan art.
Oh my god, okay. Alright, well then you have to give me a real fun fact.
Can you give me a topic?
No.
I just gave you 11 pages. I can't have one little topic.
Okay, tell me about the Cardinal Beasts. How did they come together?
The Cardinal Beasts, well, I can't tell you too much. What I can tell you is they came to Admire Lily because of a certain thing that she did that other people with Guardian Entities did not do, and they wished to learn from her. So initially they just sort of annoyed her until she acquiesced and they became an actual group. And now with her they sort of go around secretly dealing with threats to Hex K, even though they cannot go home.
Aww, they're so noble. Alright, well, sorry I kept freezing up, by the way, trying to do the voices, but just there's so many characters in this arc that I'm, like, running out of voices I can feasibly do. I'm gonna get to the point where you're gonna have to accept that some people are going to sound the same as each other.
Yeah, I said that, like, 7 arcs ago.
Oh, man. But, yeah, I guess that's everything. We'll see you guys next time. Bye!
Bye!